Hello YouTubers, this is Angry Ace 13 here again, and not too recently I did a test video with Rise of Flight player and YouTuber iFly Central. We did some tests comparing the Sopwith Camel with the Sopwith Pup, and I'd like to add a little bit to that. But before I do, I'd like to say thank you to iFly Central for allowing me on his videos, or one of his videos. It was really fun, and I was glad to do the test, and I think he had fun too. It was great. We came up with some good results, and much of the results we got I was kind of expecting, but I'm going to talk about that now. iFly Central makes a lot of his videos more based off of the gaming aspect of Rise of Flight, how the performance of different aircraft in Rise of Flight differ. What I want to talk about is comparing the Sopwith Camel's performance in the game to how it might have been in reality. Now, I'm not criticizing iFly Central. I want to make that clear. I am not criticizing the game in any sort of shape, way, or form. Doing the tests with him on comparing the Sopwith Camel to the Sopwith Pup, and as well as doing some other, I guess you could say, screwing around with them, shooting at each other and dog fighting, I made some discoveries, and I'd just like to talk about them. One of them is mostly the performance of the Sopwith Camel in the game, and what I'm pretty sure, and I think what the actual performance of the Sopwith Camel actually was in comparing the two. Now first, let's kind of compare the Sopwith Camel to the Sopwith Pup. The Sopwith Camel is essentially the successor to the Sopwith Pup, and they look very similar, but there are some differences. First of all, the biggest difference, which kind of got the Sopwith Camel its name, was the hump that's just behind the engine cowl. The guns are kind of nestled in. This part of the airframe kind of bulges up here, and was kind of a change they made to the airframe design. Another thing is, with the Sopwith Pup, both the upper and lower wings have dihedral. This means they're sort of canted up, and this helps the airplane be a little more stable. The Sopwith Camel, only the lower wing has dihedral, and the upper wing is flat. There's no dihedral. And I think this was done to help improve maneuverability, because when you have dihedral, that does stabilize the airplane, but that kind of resists roll rate. They did make some changes too to the engine cowl a little bit, as well as changes to the shape of the vertical stabilizer and a little bit to the horizontal stabilizers. The leading edges of the wingtips also on the Sopwith Camel are more rounded, while the Sopwith Pup's wingtips are more sharp and sort of go and narrow in towards the back of the wings, which those are the biggest aesthetic differences between the two airplanes. As performance goes, some of the tests, some of the results we got, I can see is believable. The turn performance tests we did, I can believe, because for several reasons. I do think that the Pup would outturn the Camel, and one of the bigger reasons is the Pup is much lighter. The Pup weighs about 750 pounds empty, roughly, and about 1,200 to 1,250 pounds loaded, roughly, because it has only one gun and a smaller engine. The Sopwith Camel, however, has a much larger engine and an extra gun, which also requires extra ammunition as well. So it weighed about 950 pounds empty and about 1,450 pounds loaded. So it was notably heavier than the Pup. And as well, the larger rotary piston engine enacted a lot more gyroscopic precession, which required a lot more rudder input to counter the gyro, which kind of fights the turns a little more, which means you have to be more cautious when you're turning with the Camel. If you're too aggressive turning with the Camel, if you pull back on the stick too hard, or you don't add enough rudder, it's not going to like that very much, and you're going to get a very nasty result, as it's shown in our video. Now, the other performance test we did, and we did more than just what was shown. We just had to cut down, or Central had to cut down the video to save time, so we didn't have a 20 or 30 minute video. The Sopwith Camel had a top speed of roughly 115 miles an hour with the Clerget 9B engine. And this speed did vary depending on fuel and ammunition load and engine type. The Clerget 9B 9-cylinder air-cooled rotary piston engine was the most common engine in the Sopwith Camel. But they also had various gnome engines, including the 160 horsepower gnome that was in the Newport 28, but that wasn't very common. They also had another version of the Clerget 9B, I think it was called the Clerget 9BF, which had a slightly longer stroke and a slightly higher compression, but that wasn't very common either. But another very common engine that really isn't talked about much was the Bentley BR1, which would sometimes be placed in the Sopwith Camel F1, but it was more commonly placed in the naval variants of the Sopwith Camel. And it put out 150 horsepower, had a slightly larger displacement and a higher compression. Most commonly, though, it had the Clerget 9B, and that's what engine this Camel has in the game. The Clerget 9B 9-cylinder air-cooled rotary piston engine. The Sopwith Pup is equipped with the Lerone 9C. The Lerone 9C is a much smaller engine. In fact, it's about 100 pounds lighter and several hundred cubic inches smaller in displacement. While the Sopwith Camel engine is a little more powerful, this one has the advantage of being a little bit lighter, which means it acts less gyroscopic precession on the airplane, and makes the airplane about 200 pounds lighter, due to the fact also that the Pup only has one gun while the Camel has two. So this engine gives the Pup an advantage in weight savings. Now, the biggest thing that I think makes a difference between the performance between the Sopwith Camel and the Sopwith Pup is the engines. Now, before I continue, I will say my sources are linked in the description. I have some books, and I also source my information from the internet as well, but I don't like to use just one source. I'll be linking my sources in the description. But we're going to talk about the differences between the Sopwith Camel's engine, which is the Clerget 9B in-game, and the Sopwith Pup's Lerone 9C. It is true that the weight of the Sopwith Pup's Lerone 9C is a lot lighter. In fact, its dry weight was about 270 pounds, versus the Camel's Clerget 9B's 380 pounds. So it's over 100 to 110 pounds lighter. But here's the thing. The displacement of the Sopwith Camel's engine is about 994 cubic inches, or roughly 16 liters. The displacement of the Sopwith Pup's engine is roughly 664 cubic inches, about 10 liters, or 11. So it's quite a bit smaller in displacement. The difference in compression between the Lerone 9C and the Clerget 9B is somewhat notable. Lerone 9C has a compression ratio of 4.5 to 1, while the Sopwith Camel's Clerget 9B has a compression ratio of about 4.53 or 4.55 to 1. So 4.56 in some cases, some of my sources say. And this is a notable difference in compression. And this will also add to the horsepower, but will also aid in having better high altitude performance. It is also important to note that the Clerget 9B was a true 2-valve, 2-pushrod engine, while the Sopwith Pup's Lerone 9C had a single pushrod and 2 valves. The single pushrod operated both valves. So, since each valve in the Clerget 9B engine has its own individual pushrod to operate each individual rocker arm to push down the valves, the Clerget 9B could possibly have valve timing that could be more supportive of high altitude performance and engine horsepower versus the Lerone 9C. It'd probably have a very small impact on engine performance in comparison to compression and displacement, but it could have a small factor as well. And overall, what I think this means is not only is the Clerget 9B going to have a lot more horsepower than the Lerone 9C, but because of its higher compression, And the fact that it's a true two-valve type rotary engine, it's a little more reliable in many cases, and it's going to allow it to sustain performance better up at higher altitudes where the air is thinner. And that's another point I'd like to bring up and make points simple. I think the Sopwith Camel's performance at high altitude is way too negatively affected, and I think that the Sopwith Camel performed much better at high altitudes than it does in the game. But that's a subject for another time. Now, what kind of difference in performance are we talking about? Pretty simple. About a 50 horsepower increase. That's very notable. That's huge. Okay, so the Lerone 9C in the Sopwith Pup is rated about 80 to 90 horsepower. The Clerget 9B in the Sopwith Camel is rated about 130, which is about 50 more. And that's a huge difference in horsepower. That is going to make a huge difference in performance. And I remember Central saying that the lighter wing loading would help the Pup climb better and stuff than one would think, but I don't think the wing loading would save the Pup as much as it does in the game. In one grave instance, where I think the performance between the Camel and the Pup were just way too close, was in climb performance. The Sopwith Camel's climb rate, in many of my sources, is typically rated at about 950 feet per minute and all the way up to 1,080 feet per minute. And on average about 1,000 feet per minute, and that's with the Clerget 9B engine. In fact, I think Wikipedia states with the Clerget 9B powered Sopwith Camel, its climb rate is rated at 1,080 feet per minute. But again, Wikipedia is not my only source of information, and I don't like it to be. The Sopwith Pup, it's more difficult to find feet per minute sources, but I've seen everything between 500 and 600 feet a minute. So what does that tell you? It tells you the Camel's climb rate is about roughly 400 to 500 feet a minute faster, according to my sources. But they don't just measure climb rate in feet per minute. They also measured climb rate in time to 10,000 feet. And in the instance of many of my sources, the Sopwith Camel has been timed to climb to 10,000 feet in a little bit over 10 minutes. The Sopwith Pup has been timed to climb to 10,000 feet, according to some of my sources, in over 15 minutes. So the Sopwith Camel can climb to 10,000 feet 5 minutes faster. And that's quite notable. And that also means, that could mean that the climb performance, in my opinion, between the Sopwith Camel and the Sopwith Pup are way too close in the game. Central and I had a little bit of fun after we did tests. And he decided he wanted to do some one-on-one duels and screw around a little bit, and I was more than happy to do that. I wanted to face someone of worthy opposition. I've never really played multiplayer much, and I wanted to have some fun. So we went at it. And he went in a Fokker D.VII with a Mercedes engine, the Mercedes D3A engine. And one of the things he did, one of the first things he did when we made our first dual pass was he went into a climb. And I went after him, and I couldn't climb with him. And this made me scratch my head and go, why? And he told me, well, the D7 outclimbs the Sopwith Camel. I said, not in real life. The D7F does, but the D7 with the Mercedes engine doesn't. Now, I could make a whole different video on the difference between the D7 and the D7F, but I'm not going to because I want to save some time here. But the D7's climb rate is roughly 800 feet a minute. Wikipedia says 772 feet a minute. The Sopwith Camel, again, has a climb rate of roughly 1,000 feet a minute. So what about time to altitude? Well, the time to altitude for the Fokker D7 with a Mercedes engine to roughly 10,000 feet has been calculated at 13 to 14 minutes, according to some of my sources. Well, again, the Sopwith Camel's time to 10,000 feet is roughly 10 minutes. So, again, here's another instance where I think the Sopwith Camel is demonstrating its nerfed ability to climb. I truly think one of the things they did with the Sopwith Camel is they really nerfed back on its rate of climb. So what I'm going to take from this is Rise of Flight's a really fun game. And I'm not criticizing the game at all, really. Maybe a little bit. And I don't think it should be changed all that much. It's good the way it is. And it's really fun. But it's not reality. It shouldn't be treated like a history book. You shouldn't take from this game what you experience and say this is what happened in reality. Because it's not. It's a video game. I see way too many instances of people who play a video game and they get so serious about it and try telling people that's how these airplanes actually were. Nope. And I can tell you several instances more how that's not true. And overall, I'd like to say thank you again to iFly Central for having me on again. That was a really good time. I had a lot of fun debunking some things and testing some myths. And I'd really like to do it again sometime soon. Had a good time. And so, I hope you all take from this and enjoy it. And if you'd like to see iFly Central's videos, the link will be down in the description to some of the videos he did and the video test we did together. So with that, I'll leave you guys, and I'll say take care.